rest, or regret as each minute slips by. These minutes make up the days of our lives, the seasons of our being, the decades and eras of our histories. But whether we count our time in minutes, the hours of work shifts, the weeks of academic semesters, or the rhythms of various cultural and religious calendars, we are together now. And now is the time for change. Good morning and welcome to Forward. I'm Andrea Williams, Director of the Women's Place and Interim Associate Vice Provost for Diversity and Inclusion. Forward is our annual symposium to bring together thinkers, advocates, and campus and public audiences to share best practices in promoting women's advancement and gender equity. Today's program, like other programs offered throughout the year at the Women's Place, is open to people of all genders because, as we say, what's good for women is good for everyone. Though today's program is virtual and many of you are joining us from places around the country, I would like to begin with a land acknowledgement that gestures towards the physical premises on which Ohio State resides. We would like to acknowledge that the land that the Ohio State University occupies is the ancestral and contemporary territory of the Shawnee, Potawatomi, Delaware, Miami, Peoria, Seneca, Wyandot, Ojibwe, and Cherokee peoples. Specifically, the university resides on land ceded in the 1795 Treaty of Greenville and the forced removal of tribes through the Indian Removal Act of 1830. We want to honor the resiliency of these tribal nations and recognize the historical contexts that have and continue to affect the indigenous peoples of this land. Thank you. Today's symposium builds on this reverence for historical context while aiming to strategically envision a present and future of access, justice, and equity. Housed within the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, the Women's Place works towards the goal of enhancing campus climate, increasing the representation of women and their allies in critical leadership roles, and influencing women's university policies and practices, those that make Ohio State a place where women and all people can thrive and make their best contributions. Today, we're also glad to welcome our off-campus partners and friends who are joining us from other higher ed institutions, businesses, and organizations, especially throughout Central Ohio. Our title for this year's symposium is Time for Change. Playing with the concept of time, we want to think about time in historical and practical ways. First, as I mentioned earlier, time is a measure of history. And in indicating a time for change, we call for the dismantling of systemic practices, policies, and attitudes that have posed barriers to equity. Think here, for example, on the motto #TimesUp, made popular a few years ago as a call to recognize against the sexual harassment and assault that is popular in many settings, and in that particular case, in entertainment. Time's Up, as an extension of the #MeToo movement, means to disrupt discrimination and gender pay equity to envision, as the organization's mission says, a world where work is safe, fair, and dignified for women of all kinds. Our theme for this year also gives a nod to Congresswoman Maxine Waters' refrain, "Reclaiming My Time," which she used to recenter her authority during a public political inquiry in 2017. This phrase has been taken up as a meme, a gospel song, and more. But today, reclaiming our time serves our purposes to inspire attendees forward to rethink our relationship to time and power in the cause of gender equity. Larger scale changes are best affected through collective commitments as spurred by both hashtag Time's Up and Reclaiming My Time. But those changes may begin on a local, individual, and practical level. As we discuss Time for Change today, what we offer aims to depart from what you might normally hear about time management to affect change. Popular wisdom and a host of best-selling books advise how we can shave a few minutes off of your day by multitasking or creating more schedules and lists. But after reading texts like these, it's easy to come away feeling more guilty than inspired. Because what these texts suggest is that we lack discipline. Coming from a deficit model, they urge us to do and to be more and more. Yet, I conjecture that it's not primarily that we waste time. Rather, for most women, and perhaps many people in general, the problem is this: we simply have too much to do. This is not coincidental in terms of gender inequity. In the workplace, these gendered expectations of how women and underrepresented people should spend their time comes along in the unofficial housekeeping of the office in subtle ways. Things like being the one always asked to pick up snacks for a colleague's birthday party, or being the one asked to take notes during a meeting when that's not an official part of your role. I was talking to one of my male friends recently who said he'd never really thought about those simple things as being taxing, but just a way that women were sometimes being nice at the office. Yet that time does accumulate. Consider it like this. One person is making reservations to pick up a cake, stopping by the local grocery store or bakery, and then coordinating Cash App reimbursements from all the people in the office. On the other hand, the other colleague is sitting at the desk, typing emails, getting ahead in their career, or maybe just being in the moment. This is one occasion, but over time, it makes a difference in terms of work-life balance and even in our visibility and presence in our offices. Similarly, at home, this unequal distribution of time disadvantages girls and women. There are social expectations that girls and women will be the final and primary ones to deal with domestic responsibilities. There, women as single parents or in heterosexual domestic relationships tend to put in more time with household chores and caregiving, often after working a full-time job, one or more. Yet, as our keynote speaker, Tiffany Dufu, indicates, as she says, women who are freed from managing it all at home have more mental space to be strategic in their careers. And thus, to make lasting change, we need to recover the loss of time and rethink its value. From an intersectional approach that looks at the impact of racial and gender identities on people's lives and times, studies, for example, have begun to identify how people of color get less sleep. And women, even when sleeping for longer time periods than men, are more prone to disrupted sleep. These things can lead to poor health outcomes. Thus, our habits of busyness, whether compelled by internal impulse, societal imperatives, or financial demands, can contribute to the gap in health, wealth, and career advancement. So it's more than a cliche to say that time is of the essence. In the latest Global Gender Gap Report, published in July 2022. The World Economic Forum projects that at our current rate of progress in combating the multiple effects of sexism, it will take another 132 years to close the gender gap. Yes, folks, that would be the year 2154. And I know we're taking care of ourselves for longevity, but it's unlikely that any of us present will last that long. And so in today's sessions, we want to share ways that we can both collectively and individually claim time for change. I hope that today's sessions will help us all to rethink and value our time as employees, students, leaders, and in all the roles that we may play in our lives. Lucky for you, we're in for an exciting lineup today. At 10, our panel called Time to Lead will be joined by speakers who consider how you can build relationships that boost your leadership skills and networks, including with allies and sponsors. Panelists also express how people who do not identify as women can be more supportive allies and advocates for fairness both at home and at work. At 11 a.m., in the panel Time is Money, we explore how you can utilize your time in ways that bring you more passion and income. Learn how to diversify your wealth portfolio by investing, starting a small business, or side hustle, as some people call it, and planning for retirement. And our program culminates in a noon keynote by Tiffany Dufu, founder of The Crew, a dynamic peer coaching network, and the author of the book, Drop the Ball, Achieving More by Doing Less. And as you recognize by the title alone, we all need some advice in this regard. So sit back, relax, tune in for a great set of panels ahead. But now, here are some additional announcements to share more about the Women's Place, our sponsor for today. Thank you.
The Women's Place is here to move you forward. At the Women's Place, we believe that women and all people achieve more in a supportive and inclusive environment. Our office offers networking, resources, and other opportunities to help faculty and staff to thrive and make their best progress here at the university. People of all genders are welcome at the Women's Place because together we can help and achieve gender parity. Whether you're early in your career at the university or further along, there's something here for you at the Women's Place. We sponsor professional development opportunities and grants, events for women's empowerment, and networking circles for women of color. In our signature leadership programs, faculty and staff can gain more information and skills to become dynamic and influential leaders. Whatever your next steps, we're here for you. To find out more about us, check us out at our website, womensplace.osu.edu, and sign up for our newsletter, or follow us on Twitter at Women's Place OSU. We look forward to meeting you and moving you forward. The Women's Place is here to move you forward. At the Women's Place, we believe
Good morning. Thank you for joining us, and I apologize for technical difficulties I'm having this morning, so sincerely apologize for the delay. My name is Kimberly Lowe McCullough, and I'm the Director of Strategic Collaborations and External Engagement in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and I have the pleasure of being the moderator this morning. Thank you for joining us for this panel, Time for Change, Gaining Influence, Allies, and Sponsors. Personal experience and research studies both show how having mentors can often be the difference between success and failure, both for students and for professionals making their way through their careers. Mentors can share advice, honest criticism, and accountability to help you move towards your goal. Common advice is that you don't just need one mentor, but many to address the different components of your work and life. Yet today's panel aims to move us forward into discussing other kinds of strategic relationships that we can use to enhance our careers. For example, in the book, Forget a Mentor, Find a Sponsor, the new way to fast track your career, founder and CEO Sylvia Ann Hewlett explains that sponsors do three important things. First, they put their reputation on the line to go out on a limb on your behalf. They advocate for you when you are not proverbially in the room in decision making. And they give you cover so that you can take risks. Today, we'll be sharing more about how to gain sponsors, expand your influence, and gain allies, particularly people who differ from you, who are willing to support you and your cause. We have a great group of panelists to contribute to this discussion, so I'm going to actually turn it over to each of them to introduce themselves. We'll start with you, Jasmine. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jasmine Hu. I'm a professor of management at Fisher College of Business. My primary research interests include social leadership, work teams, as well as remote work. And thank you for having me. I'm very excited to interact with and learn from you all today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Jeannie Barrow. I am a transformational speaker and leadership coach, career strategist. #1 best-selling author. It is an honor to be with you today to speak about this really timely topic of time for change, moving forward, time to lead. And I hope to use the 30 years of experience that I have in financial services, technology, 6 of those years running my own business, Executive Bound. And as an immigrant coming to the US at the age of 14 from a small village in the Dominican Republic and starting from scratch, not knowing the language, not knowing the culture or having any friends. So I can tell you a little bit from my practical lived experiences, the value that I have gained, excuse me, from building relationships and gaining a support network, including allies, sponsors, and mentors. So it's a pleasure to be with all of you.
And good morning, Brad Johnson here. I'm a clinical psychologist and a professor in the Department of Leadership, Ethics, and Law at the U.S. Naval Academy. And I have really spent my career researching mentoring, sponsoring relationships and what those look like when mentees say they're really valuable and useful. And then in the last 12 years, all of my work has really pivoted in mentoring, sponsoring to my collaboration with the next gentleman who will introduce himself. And we've really been focused on how can men be better in this space and lean into relationships across difference and in particular across gender. Dave?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Great to be here with my colleagues on this exciting panel conversation we're going to have. I'm a sociologist, professor at Johns Hopkins in the Carey Business School, and I do all my research in the area of the intersection of gender, work, and family. And as Brad said, I've been doing all of our research together over the last 10 years and focusing on engaging men in more better mentorship, sponsorship, and allyship. And that's led to our 2 books. The first, Athena Rising, How and Why Men Should Mentor Women. And the second, Good Guys, How Men Can Be Better Allies for Women in the Workplace. And looking forward to a great conversation today.
Thank you all so much. Before we dive in, just a few reminders for the audience. Please pose your questions in the Q&A function on the toolbar. That will allow for the speakers and our behind-the-scene host to respond to you in writing or answer your questions verbally. Also, follow the chat function for additional links and resources, and feel free to offer some of your own. Today's full symposium is being recorded and will be available to all registrants about a week after the event. So let's get started. I'd like for us to talk first about how we can gain influence, which we can simply define as the ability to inspire others in thought or action. Robert Cialdini calls influence a form of persuasion. How can gaining influence be the foundation to advancing your career or building your leadership? And I'll open that to any of our panelists.
If it's okay, I'm going to start because I think I'm going to touch on topics that all of us are going to cover eventually throughout this panel. And the first one is that if you can type in the chat, when you have followed somebody, what are some of the characteristics that these people have? People that you follow, people that you trust, people that you entrust either your career or basically your career, right? Because when we are in an organization, no matter what kind of organization, we are usually leading someone. So those people who are influential, what are their characteristics? And when you break that down for your own example, you will come up with the answer for you. So in general, what I would say, some of the things that make people influential are building relationships. How are you building relationships around with your team, with the people above you, people who are across the organization with whom you collaborate? How are you building your personal brand? And people may say, Ginny, what is a personal brand? And I would say a personal brand is what people say about you when you leave the room. That's the simplest way to describe it. And so how are you creating experiences for people who are interacting with you? Are these experiences collaborative, or are these experiences combative? Are these experiences constructive and resourceful and productive? Are you supporting people around you, or are you just thinking about yourself? This is all part of your personal brand. And another way to build influence is to communicate powerfully, to be able to engage people, to listen, to look, to understand where they're coming from, what are their ambitions, what are their desires, what are their fears. So those are a few ways, which I'm sure you will expand upon as we go through the panel, in which people can increase their influence. Is developing your expertise as a subject matter expert, being that go-to person in your field, in your area, where people say, I need to talk about this topic with someone. I'm going to go to Jasmine. I'm going to go to Brad. I'm going to go to David, because they're experts in those particular areas. So those are ways to build your influence and do it organically in a way that is aligned with your zone of genius.
Thank you, Dr. Barrow. Anyone else would like to contribute to that?
I think Dr. Barrow makes excellent points. Just one thing I want to add is that it's very important to know that influencers do not necessarily have a positive influence for others, as they may have either positive and negative effects. It's worth noting that people can be very influential in guiding others to engage in unethical behaviors.
Thank
I'll
you
just
very
add
much,
one.
Catherine.
Love to just add one more point into this. That I thought Dr. Barrow did just a great job there covering that, and I love a lot of the comments and the feedback in the chat there. And I think a lot of those traits, as we look at those, again, things that people value in leaders, and I think that's being seen as a leader and developing that reputation and that brand is really important, and recognizing that. Yeah, it's a relationship, right, with others that's really important, and developing that trust is part of that. So things like authenticity and empathy and humility are so important as we begin to develop that trust. And really, I like to think of this, thinking from the beginning of careers, is we're always building social capital, and we're thinking about who we're influencing and who we're connecting to in our networks, and developing that over time. And again, so that we can not only do it for ourselves, but also develop that brand and reputation of how we give back to others, how we work with others. And people are like, oh, she's a great teammate. I really love having her on the team. And those are people that I want to work with, and developing that kind of reputation, I think, goes a long ways in developing that social capital over time.
Thank you. When we talk about influence, we find that many people are calling themselves influencers, especially on social media. What is the relationship between being an influencer and influential? How are they the same or different? Jenny or Jasmine, do you care to answer that?
Yeah, there's definitely an overlap between being an influencer and being influential. An influencer, when you think about people like Matthew McConaughey and Beyonce and people who are out there, right, who are famous, they are influencers in that they draw a crowd. They have impact on others, but it's more about the ability to cultivate and engage an audience. An influential person doesn't necessarily have to be an influencer in that social media space or the marketplace, but rather somebody who's able to impact how others think and behave. So when you think about a team member in your team, within your team, could be extremely influential because he or she or they are extremely knowledgeable, and they are thoughtful, and they are caring, and they listen, and they communicate their ideas clearly, and they show confidence. All of the qualities, they're organized, they're intentional, all the things that you put in the chat as it relates to what creates influence. When someone exudes those qualities, and they're beautiful qualities, by the way, in the chat, that creates someone being influential. So that it doesn't require you to have a following. It doesn't require you to have even a leadership role, even though I always say we're all leaders because we're all leaders of ourselves, but it doesn't require you to have a leadership role within the organization that you're in. So that is the major difference between the two. The overlap is that you're both kind of driving how people are behaving and thinking, but in one you need that external group and audience, and the other one you do not need to have that and still be very influential. And I personally believe that, if back to Dr. Jasmine's comment, if you're going to be an influencer or influential, please do it for good, right? Like let's move the world forward instead of using it for our own selfish reasons. I think the world will be a much better place if we kind of followed that kind of guideline.
Yes, exactly. I agree with what Dr. Barra just said. I think being influencer and being influencer are similar in a way because they both aim to make an impact on the attitudes and behaviors of others. And as Dr. Barrow said, influencers, they do not necessarily need formal authority or face-to-face interactions to influence others' attitudes and behaviors. And I recall that you mentioned about charisma, like someone who's more influential or more charismatic. And research has shown that too little or too much charisma may not necessarily be good. Because if you're too influential or you're too charismatic, people tend to follow whatever you say without really thinking for their own perspective and voicing their own opinions. So we probably need a moderate amount of influence. And so that on one hand, you're able to guide people towards a good direction. On the other hand, you allow them to speak up, having their own rooms for expressions.
Thank you. I want to think again about people who have leadership or managerial ambitions, but aren't really in a titled leadership position. How can you exert your influence from wherever you are in the organization? Jasmine, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to answer this question. It's an excellent question. Research in organizational studies has frequently shown that people can influence others without formal authority. And evidence from self-managed teams has demonstrated that informal leaders can have a positive impact on their team's collective performance. And drawing from my own research, we have found that individuals who are moderately assertive can demonstrate sufficient confidence and initiative without appealing to controlling or arrogant. Similarly, those who are moderately warm are more likely to gain popularity within their teams without overwhelming interactions. And our research also shown that individuals who are more socially motivated, meaning they're driven to promote the well-being of others and team effectiveness, are more likely to receive positive peer reactions and be selected as informal leaders. And these individuals can help improve both their own performance and their team's performance.
Thank you, Jasmine.
I would like to just add to that. I love that. And in the work that Dave and I do, sometimes we hear from junior men when we're talking about allyship that, hey, I'm junior. I can't really influence the workplace as a younger male, someone who identifies that way. And our message to those gentlemen is actually there are a lot of junior men in the room often, maybe in a meeting where that sexist comment occurs. Your willingness to come unfrozen and simply disrupt that in the moment suddenly empowers everybody else in the room, especially other junior folks, to do the same. And same goes for what if there is a senior woman? Maybe she's the first person in leadership. As a junior male, do you have the courage to say out loud, she is doing a great job. Here's what I admire about her. That is profoundly influential to other men who happen to be in the room listening to you, but that requires you to put some skin in the game.
And maybe just to expand a little bit more on that, I would even say that thinking about, as we're going to talk more about mentorship and sponsorship a little bit later, but having the reputation for being somebody who is a good mentor, who does sponsoring, is successful at doing it. And again, these are outside often of our formal positions. Nobody typically has sponsor as their formal position or mentor as their formal position, which is something that we do and giving back to our organizations. But those people who have those reputation have a really strong influence on the organization because they are the ones who are developing the next level of talent, the next generation of talent. They're the ones giving back to the organization and really beginning to shape it in many different ways out there. So having that reputation, being known for being a great mentor and successful sponsor out there can be another way to think about how we do this.
And I want to close this question by sharing that another way that we can exert our influence without having any organizational title is by sharing ideas and being a problem solver, especially for women. I know many of us are struggling to speak up, especially in rooms where we're the minority in terms of numbers. And so sharing our ideas, not being afraid to share the knowledge you have, especially when it's going to be to solve a problem that's on the table. So it's germane to the conversation. And the way that I help my clients, for example, just one quick tool that you can use is when you walk into a meeting, tell yourself, I am not going to be wallpaper. And that will give you the courage to say, this is a conversation where I can contribute. I'm going to share an idea. I'm going to be part of the solution, and I'm going to be a problem solver. I'm going to go in there with my ears open, and I'm going to share whenever I see that what I have to share is going to be adding value to the conversation. That would make you very influential.
Thank you all so much for those valuable comments. What we've been talking about for growing your influence can help you to gain the positive attention of allies and sponsors. Through the Women's Place, Ohio State has an Advocates and Allies program of man identifying colleagues who commit to gender equity. But occasionally, a few will say that while they mean to be supportive, they are hesitant to establish cross-gender mentoring relationships for fear of appearing paternalistic or trying to help women. Brad and David, I know your research and writing has thought a lot about allyship. How would you recommend that allies broach these relationships and assume responsibility?
Yeah, I can lead off with this, Dave, and I know we have a lot of fun things to say about this topic. I will say I'm delighted to hear that OSU's got this male ally and advocate program. One little piece of advice I have for those of you who participate and identify as men. Excellent, lean in, do the behaviors, don't call yourself an ally, don't self-identify. Let's let women and other minoritized folks decide if we're really showing up that way. So to your question, Kimberly, gosh, yes, in all of our research, we find so many things that can keep men on the sidelines. I do see these high talent women around me. I know that I should offer mentoring and sponsoring, but I am anxious. I don't want to step in it. I don't want to say the wrong thing. Some men are worried about gossip and rumors, right? If I start mentoring a junior woman, there are still men laboring under misperceptions about Me Too, right? Me Too, straightforward. Women would love to not be assaulted or harassed. Super low bar for men. But instead of that, you might hear, oh gosh, women are dangerous or scary. And gosh, as a clinical psychologist, I'll just share with you there's only one treatment for that. It's called exposure therapy. More interaction, more engagement, more mentoring of women is the only way to overcome that. We also hear from some men that, yeah, I see these talented junior women. I want to offer developmental conversations. I just don't know what that sounds like. And again, I don't want it to be misperceived. I think men make this too awkward. So could I just demo this really quickly? Dave, could you help me out here? I'm going to have Dave be my high talent junior woman. Let me just try it this way first. Dave, I'd like to mentor you.
What the heck are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, so many problems with that. I mean, never use your creepy voice, but the worst part is he doesn't know where that's coming from, right? There's no context for that. So let me try it this way. Hey, Dave, I saw you give that presentation last week. I thought it was wonderful. And I was thinking the hiring committee sure got it right, bringing you on board. I hope we can keep you here. If you ever want to drop by and just chat about next steps or where you'd like to go, I've got an open door. Feel free to drop by.
Thanks, Brad. I appreciate that.
He has context now, and that's not a heavy lift. I also would just encourage men to show up with curiosity and humility. You know, Dave and I kind of think of this as the Michelangelo behavior. You know, Michelangelo was very humble as a sculptor, and he always said, "Gosh, I had no idea what was in that stone. I was surprised as everybody else." If you can show up with that kind of curiosity and humility when you're mentoring and invite her career dream, learn about that so you know where to open doors for her, I think that's going to go well. And then just a last thing, um, be a mentor of the moment. Don't wait until you're paired with somebody in a formal program. Just show up with that attitude of interest and curiosity and affirmation. If that's your brand, I guarantee you people are going to respond to you.
And can I say the flip side of that on the receiving end, as a woman who's had mentors her entire career, and I would say 95% of them were men, is to be open and as curious as Brad and David are recommending that the allies be. In other words, when an ally comes to you and makes a comment like Brad made to David in their little role play, don't think that they're just saying that. Take them up on it. Don't let that opportunity and whatever's on the table just stay there. Take advantage of it. Get curious, get intentional. Make sure you even schedule it. Reach out to Brad once a month and say, Brad, just checking in. How is it going? This is what's happening with me. Even a simple 15-minute check-in, a 15-minute cyber coffee or tea, as I call it, would go such a long way in building the relationship with Brad, who opened the door to be a mentor. And if Brad is high enough in the organization, by the way, Brad is also going to be a sponsor because he has the power and authority to say, I would like for Ginny to run that initiative. And that is so important for us not to leave those opportunities on the table.
I think a couple other quick, just best practices. Brad hit so many of them there, but I think a couple others would be, remember that we should show up and be good listeners. And I think this is one of the ones that across the research we've done comes up over and over again. And again, not just being curious, but also listening with an intent to learn, that you don't have all the answers here, that I'm really trying to learn, hear a different perspective, a different point of view. And that's also going to mean that you don't make too many assumptions either. And again, I think it's really easy for us to walk into new relationships and to have some of these assumptions about who people are. I mean, it might be related to some of their identities, or maybe their desires or where they want to go in their careers. But we need to check our assumptions, and especially as we think about mentoring and sponsoring and being good allies out there, because again, I think too often with the listening skills, one of the challenges we find with mentors and sponsors sometimes is that we go into problem solving mode with our mentees or our proteges and trying to think about how we're going to solve their problems. And sometimes, a good mentor can just be a good sounding board, just be there to listen, to hear, maybe to validate some of the experiences that they're having, and give some feedback if desired, if that's something that they're looking for.
I certainly love what you all have said. I want to mention I'm not expert on the topic, like Dr. Smith and Johnson. I haven't read your book yet, but I'm looking forward to reading it. I think you all answered a question about how men can do it. I would like just offer some evidence on why men need to do that. Management research have found that women and non-white executives, business executives, who frequently engage in diversity valuing behaviors were actually rated much worse by their bosses in terms of their competence and performance than their female and non-white counterparts who did not do so. It seems like non-white and female executives are actually punished for promoting diversity, which is totally unfair because it places the challenges of creating equality solely on the shoulders of individuals who are at greater risk of being punished. So it is really important. We really need more colleagues who identify as men, especially white men, to promote inclusion because they are less likely to be subjected to unconscious biases and are in better positions to endorse the competence and potential and performance of women and racially minor group members.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists with those wonderful responses and great information. I've heard some people say that the difference between a mentor and a sponsor is that in a mentoring relationship, the mentee drives the relationship. But in a sponsorship relationship, it is the senior colleague as a sponsor who drives the relationship. They are the one with the power and the position to open doors for you. Still, there's a role to play for the person benefiting from that sponsorship. How can you show a potential sponsor that you're worth investing in? What do you need to do on your part? David or Jenny or Dr. Barrow, I'll start with you all.
Maybe I'll start there. And I love this question, first of all, because I think it brings in a lot of different issues related to how we think about mentoring and sponsoring, and remembering that both, however you can textualize them, are relationships. And I think that's first and foremost, remembering that there's two people in this relationship, and everybody has responsibilities and needs to do the work that's associated with it. First, I think I would say that, from a mentoring perspective, remembering that mentors can also be advocates, right? They can do what maybe some people might consider to be formal sponsorship in some ways. A lot of it has to do with the positioning of what their role, where they have the ability to do some of that. Some mentors do, and some do it really well in terms of being great advocates. They can talk, who knows their mentee better than anyone. So when they're in the room, the mentee's not there, they have the opportunity to talk about their mentee in ways that, again, can be considered advocacy, could be considered even sponsorship in some ways. The other one I see, Brad and I see often happening in the research that we've done, is that, I think excellent mentors who are, tend to be very humble and just very open and authentic about the fact that, I might be able to help you in a very specific aspect of your career in the mentoring relationship, but there may become a point, either through growth and development or expansion of where you're headed, that maybe you're exceeding my capabilities. And now one of the things we see great mentors do is that this is an opportunity to open up your network, your social capital, and then connect your mentee back into that and say, I can't help you with that, but I know somebody who can. And let me make an introduction here for you. Again, these can be especially today in the virtual world, we can do the virtual introductions, or it could be in person, but the opportunity to open up their social capital and share that with them. And when they do it, they can also do what, we like to think of as being that raving fan, right? The mentor can be the raving fan for how incredible your mentee is. And I think one of the interviews that Brad and I did actually we did it for 2 interviews for both of our books, was with Sheryl Sandberg, previously with Facebook and Meta. And, one of the things that she said was so important around mentoring and sponsoring was, from a mentoring perspective, it's not enough to just be nice to women, that we have to do that loud raving fan, be that person who can really advocate and share our social capital with that person. She said one of the examples that she always remembers for herself was when she was in her first job as a personal assistant to the Secretary of the Treasury, coming out of college. Everywhere they would go on the world stage, he would always introduce her, make that connection into his network in that world. And he wouldn't just introduce her as, oh, this is Sheryl Sandberg, but he would say, hey, this is Sheryl Sandberg. She just graduated #1 from Harvard and economics. She's phenomenal. I couldn't do my job without her. And he would go on and on for a couple of minutes about her. And after a while, she said she was very self-conscious about it. And it's like, hey, when you do that, it really feels embarrassing. And he said back to her that, no, Sheryl, this is how it happens. This is how people begin to value you in the same way that I value you. They will see the value because I'm talking about you. I'm being that raving fan. And Brad and I always love to make sure that as we think about mentors and sponsors, that again, how are we doing that? How are we being that raving fan for our mentee or our protege? So again, lots of opportunities there. And I think as the mentee or the protege shows up and making sure that they can make that value proposition to their sponsor or to their mentor and make sure that they are communicating that to them. They can communicate and talk through their dreams and goals in their career, have thought through that with their sponsors and make sure that they're very clear about that. And then when they're mentors and sponsors, they give them opportunities or they give them challenges or they create opportunities out there to do this work, that they show up and they take it on, and they make sure that they're representing their sponsor or their mentor in a way that is appropriate for the level of the work that's being done there. But I'll stop there. I know that other people have a lot of thoughts on this.
That's beautiful, David. I'm going to add on to what David said, so I'm going to try not to overlap. One of the things that we talked about before about a sponsor is that a sponsor advocates for you at levels behind closed doors. They remove obstacles, they promote you to their network, etc. So that means that you need to show up, right? You need to be able to deliver results. You need to be able to bring ideas, to identify gaps that you see in the organization, not from I am tattletelling on what's happening at my level, but rather I see an opportunity where there's an existing gap that we could potentially close, and here's an idea. So when you become that person, that mentee, that sponsee, who actually becomes a source of information for your sponsor, where you get to share your perspective at whatever level you are with your sponsor, you become an asset. And so don't be afraid to be curious, to notice what's happening around you, to bring it up to your sponsor. And don't forget to continue to expand your knowledge base. Because again, your sponsor is putting themselves out there for you. And in order to gain that sponsorship so they can promote you, you need to be that kind of person, right? You have to be that, have the character, have the integrity, have the work ethic, have the ability to collaborate with people. You basically need to be the person whom you would promote if you were in your presence. So in other words, if you were the sponsor, what would drive you to sponsor somebody? That's the person you need to become. So for those of you who are here, obviously, if you can put in the chat, what have been some of the value that you have brought to your sponsor? Your perspective is a value that you bring to your sponsor from wherever you sit in the organization. Your work ethic, your knowledge, your expertise, the results. Don't be shy, even though many of us, especially women, feel very shy. Even yesterday, I was speaking with a client who was saying, Ginny, I feel really uncomfortable even when I'm stating the facts about what I just accomplished. And one of the stories she shared is that one time she was sharing with her friends how excited she was about this project that she completed. Excited because it was intricate, complex, and she got it done. And she was just sharing her experience. And one of the people listening to her said, "You are bragging." And that shut her down. So the other thing is to notice whose company you're keeping. Because if you are surrounded by raving fans, the people that are listening to you are going to be happy that you just completed that project and not try to drag you down because they think you're bragging when you're actually being factual. So always pay attention to your audience and don't let the external influences bring you down and lower your confidence and create self-doubt in you that, ooh, I shouldn't talk about myself. Let's talk about ourselves in the context of the value that we're adding, how our team is contributing, and how that's helping the organization. When we do it that way, it's not bragging, it's all fact. So thank you so much, David, for that beautiful insight on how to gain sponsors and show your value.
Thank you again for that insight. And just a reminder to our attendees to feel free to use the Q&A feature so that we can hopefully answer any questions that you might have from these amazing panelists. So what can workplaces do to make sure that women and underrepresented employees have adequate access to mentorship and sponsorship to advance their careers? Jasmine, I'll start with you.
I think it's quite important for companies to have more specific practice and intervention programs, such as a lot of workshops and sponsor programs you have done at the Women's Place, so that employees know that it's not just something that they say, but something they actually do. Actions speak louder than words. We often follow what leaders, organizational decision makers' actions rather than what they just simply say. And if the words do not really align with actions, that actually create a bigger sense of injustice or unfairness that can lead to higher level turnover, intention and actual turnover, as research has found. So I think it's very important for decision makers to really incorporate their visions into day-to-day actions and programs, allow employees to really see they actually meant to do that, to promote DEI or inclusion and diversity in the workplace.
And I would add to that when companies make an effort, an intentional effort to also create cross-functional teams, because in many cases, when you have a cross-functional team, you have an opportunity for those, or I call them organic mentorship relationships to evolve and emerge. And when we do that, we are allowing also our teams to get exposed to diverse groups. And so there is an opportunity for us to take advantage of that. And again, it all falls back on the individual. Every person that you interact with in the course of your day is fair game in my book. If you respect someone who you are engaging with and interacting with through your work, especially if you have something in common, like a project that you're working on, that is fair game for you to approach them and say, Kimberly, David, Jasmine, I know we're working on this project and I know a little bit about you. Would you be open to a 50-minute cyber coffee? I would love to pick your brain about this particular aspect of the project or this particular thing about you. I'm very curious. Would you be open to that? And typically people would say absolutely, because people love to talk about themselves. There is no way they're going to leave that opportunity go by. So that is always on the table for you, and it's a matter of becoming courageous and a little fearless, which doesn't mean you don't feel the fear. It means you act despite the fear. And when you do it, you realize, I didn't melt. I actually didn't disappear. Look, this person was receptive to having that 50-minute cyber coffee with me, and you begin to build relationships like this. That step will give you more courage. Every time you quote unquote win, you get more courage. And if somebody says, I'm sorry, Ginny, I won't be able to make it on this particular week, then say, don't give up. Don't give up. Persistence is so important. It's not personal. Brad could be going through something in his own life and business where he can't make the time for me this week, even this month. In a couple of months, ping Brad again and say, Brad, I know we connected and and you told me that you weren't able to. How is this week or next week or in the next 2 weeks? And so having that intention is what's going to help us move forward with courage.
I love that, Dr. Barrow. And I just last thing, I want to jump back to something that Jasmine said, about how organizations can approach this. Dave and I do a lot of work with sponsor launch programs, right? And I think one of the best practices, if you're really trying to elevate more women, for example, is to make this very affirming, right? So have a high talent, future leader program, right? And make it a deliberate sponsoring program and invite women in and say, hey, you've been identified as a future leader in this organization, and we want to make this commitment to you. That's all great. Or send women to leadership programs that are specifically designed to women, for women. Here's the problem. If you do that in a siloed way, right, just communicate to women, hey, we're nominating you for this program, so go take care of it, become a leader. And then when she comes back, there's not support in place, there's not sponsorship, there's not accountability for leaders to actually remove roadblocks, maybe around bias in potential evaluations for leadership, and they're not providing the sponsorship, then I think that's a fail. So yes, have mentor sponsor programs, identify high talent people, but then give them the support to go with it to make sure it's successful.
Thank you so much. What is your best advice for people who believe it is time to lead and want to gain a promotion or make a career transition? Brad, I'll start with you.
Yeah, wow. Well, I think Ginny gave the perfect answer to this one already in many ways. I love her be tenacious, take a risk, put yourself out there in terms of maybe making connections and establishing contact. I will call on one piece of research that I think really supports what Ginny said. And it's in psychology, it's called the mere exposure effect. And I find it really interesting. Guess who we end up mentoring and sponsoring and working with and respecting? It's people we interact with and happen to get to know, right? Just mere exposure, proximity. And so if I never meet you, if you don't come to my attention, I am not going to have the opportunity to become your mentor or sponsor or maybe influential colleague. So, go with the science. I would heed Jenny's advice and just start some of those conversations. And remember, you don't need just one senior person. You really want to curate a constellation of folks because looking at all the mentoring network research, we just know that people who have more, developmental support in their network, they go farther. They make more money, they get more promotions. So it's good for you to do this broadly. Don't stop with just one important connection.
And I would add to that, thank you so much, Brad, that it's also extremely important, and some of you already mentioned it, to invest in yourself. There's no way you're going to grow and advance if you don't invest in yourself, invest the time, the energy, the effort in learning new skills, and then being self-aware. Where are my gaps? Where am I looking to go? Getting clarity around the direction that you want to take your career in. We are all busy enough. We're not looking for something else to add to our to-do list. Let's be extremely mindful about what direction do I want to go in? And for me to go in that direction, what do I need to learn? I'll give you a perfect example. When 7 years ago, when I transitioned to run my own business, Executive Bound, I have been in the corporate world for 25 years. I had been a W-2 employee, right? Getting my paycheck every 2 weeks. I went to school. I graduated college. I went to night school to get my MBA. I was still working. I went to night school to get my master's in computer science. I continued to work. I was going to night school to get my PhD in information systems. All of this, I was still gaining my experience, building relationships, delivering impact, asking my mentors and sponsors, how can I add more value so that I can continue to grow, and getting clear on what direction I wanted to take my career. I didn't want to be a programmer anymore. I became a project manager, and then I became the liaison between business and technology, because that's where I saw my drive and my passion. So get clear on what drives you and what you're passionate about. And from that place, you'll figure out what you need to do to retool. And sometimes you can get yourself a good haircut, right? So you need someone to help you, gain a coach, look for a mentor, look for somebody who already has the skill set that you want and who can help you accelerate, which is what I did 7 years ago. It would have taken me 10 years to get my business up and running and be successful versus 5 or 3 by following mentors who have already been doing coaching and transformational speaking and doing building courses online. So I follow them and I was able to speed, like warp speed. What it would have taken me years to do, I was able to do it in months. And so that is another way that you can continue to show value, to contribute, and to transition to do work that you feel connected to, that brings you joy, that makes you feel fulfilled, and that isn't just keeping busy. There's no time for that anymore.
Just to add to Ginny and Brad's excellent points, knowing what you want to do and what you pursue, what you're passionate about is very important. And being vocal about your career aspiration and needs is also important, as well as volunteering to take on challenging tasks that allow you to acquire new skills, can really help others recognize your potential and competence. Research in management has consistently shown that being proactive, which means you take initiative to build on your own career rather than just responding to opportunities, is positively related to both objective and subjective career success. Objective indicators are measured by salary, promotions, and subjective indicators are measured by your own satisfaction with your career and your workplace in general.
Thank you all so much. We have received a couple of questions from our attendees, so I want to make sure we get time to answer them. The first comes from Christina Dietz, so thank you, Christina. I'm currently reading a book recommended by Brené Brown called Leadership is a Relationship: How to Put People First in the Digital Era. One of the things it talked about how to be a good leader, or how to be a good leader is to exercise forgiveness. Can you talk about how you would apply this concept in a mentor-mentee relationship from a mentor perspective, but also from a mentee perspective?
This is a great question. Wow. Forgiveness. I would start with self, right? Self-forgiveness. If you are the mentor, you're not going to do everything right. Back to what Brad and David were speaking about. You're going to make bloopers. You're going to be like, oh, I can't believe I said that, right? I can't believe I did that. So give yourself forgiveness as the mentor or sponsor, that this is an evolving, organic relationship that we're going to be learning from each other. That is on the mentor sponsor side. As the mentee, give yourself forgiveness. I know that for many of us, and maybe this is you, type yes in the chat, there's a lot of confusion around what am I supposed to do with my mentor and my sponsor? Like, what do I do? How do I guide that relationship? How do I make it the most productive? So give yourself forgiveness for figuring it out as you go and see what evolves. And if you have a good mentor, he or she or they will be great at asking empowering questions, right? What or how questions that will kind of lead you to openings that you can use to create those conversations. And likewise, I would say as a mentor-mentee, ask a lot of empowering questions and listen. And that's what you're there to learn. So I have a friend who says you have 2 ears and a mouth, use them proportionately. Listen more than you speak. And when you have something valuable to say, don't hold back. So that's what I would say about forgiveness on both ends.
I love this question. I'm also a big fan of Brené Brown, especially her points on leaders' vulnerability and forgiveness. And just like Jeannie just mentioned, that we should start forgiveness from ourselves. At the risk of self-promotion, my own recent research have found that leaders, when they really spend time to reflect on their own mistakes, their blind spots, their own vulnerabilities, they become more humble. I think that's a frequent word and that Brad and David mentioned earlier, that when leaders express humility, we found that their teams more likely to spend time to reflect on their own mistakes, limitations, and consequently, their teams become performing better and they reach higher performance goals. And we have done 4 studies across different cultures to replicate, to support the findings. And it's very robust, and reflecting on mistakes can really help both leaders and their team members. And applying to mentor-mentee situation, if we can really have a positive view and seeing mistakes or failures in the past as a way to improve yourself, and both parties can benefit from it.
I love that, Jasmine. And one of the things that I find to be very powerful is that, the research on reciprocal mentoring, right? These more mutual relationships are so desirable, especially for junior folks, but also minoritized people broadly, including women, really value the reciprocal learning in relationships. I think if you curate that kind of humble, as you said, Jasmine, relationship, my mentee is likely to give me, the authentic feedback when I blow it or make a mistake. If the relationship is hierarchical and top down, I think that she may not feel like she can give me that kind of feedback. I may not be open to it. And so a way to mitigate this right off the bat is just to be willing to share mistakes, and I hope that I do that often as a mentor. Hey, let me tell you where I got this wrong, often. Or, here's another illustration. Maybe I'm mentoring a junior woman. You may have noticed, by the way, that I'm an older white male. I won't call you older today, Dave. I often do that. But I'll self-identify that way. I may say, hey, once in a while, I've noticed that as an older male, I can get a little paternalistic or like a dad. And I know you don't need a father. I know you don't need me to rescue you. So if I do anything like that, would you be willing to share that with me just so I can be more self-aware? That kind of invitation, I think makes a relationship reciprocal. And I think I have the opportunity maybe to be better.
Thank you all so much. And Brad, thank you for not calling out David. We appreciate that. I know he does. So we have time for one more question from the audience. I just want to make sure we get to it. So should you inform your direct manager or pertinent unit leader about mentorship or sponsorship relationships? Sometimes I'm concerned that it may signal that I'm looking for a new role or that I am a flight risk. So I'll open that up to anyone, maybe one or two panelists, if you all could address that or if you have any comments.
Wow, that's a great question, right? There's always that fear. What will they think if they see me talking with people, especially somebody above your manager level? It could be threatening to your manager, depending on your manager's character, or I'm going to say baggage. I say that with compassion. And so what I would say is, I always recommend to my clients that they build a mentorship relationship with their manager. And if you're in a position in the organization that is high enough in terms of senior enough, and you report, in my case, I reported to the chief information officer who reported to the managing member of the company. When your manager is in a senior enough level, your manager is also a sponsor. So to me, those are organic mentor and sponsorship relationships that you need to leverage. Having trust with your manager is part of what makes a mentor and any type of relationship successful. Having trust means you can have candid conversations about your aspirations, not necessarily like, I want to leave here, but more around skill building. I really want to become a better public speaker. I would, welcome opportunities where I can get up in front of the group and present. I'm really looking to expand my knowledge of project management. If I could go to this project management course, it would be so valuable because I can apply it here, here, here. So let's have honest and candid conversations with our managers about who we are, where we want to go in terms of our skill set development. And I would find it very difficult that a good manager will not get behind you in helping you grow, unless, as I mentioned, he, she, or they are carrying their own bags and they haven't been able to have the self-awareness to realize that their bags are impacting how they're leading their team. If that's the case, that's a whole different conversation for us to have. But in the meantime, let's have the courage to build that trust with our manager, where you can have conversations about your personal and professional development. And it's not a threat, but rather, I would like to get to know more people in the organization so that I can do my job better with a better context of how my work fits into the big picture. Who can argue with that? So once you make that request, what they say back, whether yes or I don't think so, will tell you what kind of environment you're in. And then with your mentor support, you can have more empowering follow-up conversations with your manager about how to proceed. But you first have to open that door and see what happens. So don't be afraid to take the leap and don't make assumptions about what they may or may not say. You have to validate your assumptions by actually doing it and seeing what happens.
Well, I know we're getting, oh, go ahead, David. I'll let you give final comment. Go right ahead.
I love what Dr. Barrow said there, and I would encourage people to maybe even be thinking about this from, again, a proactive perspective, as you've heard over and over again today, and thinking about your career. Maybe it's your career management team. You have your own network, your career management team, and certainly your direct report manager ought to be a part of that. And you're going to have to develop that relationship with them in a way that it makes that productive. And your mentors should be part of that. Your sponsors should be part of that. And they should, in many cases, they should know each other or have some sort of a level of communication. You'll have to work through that in terms of how you want to do that communication, what you want to share across there. And I would hope that you would have managers that would actually be encouraging you to find mentors and sponsors outside of your own organization, right? Because we need this broad network, and we know people are going to move around and nobody stays with an organization forever anymore. that we're going to move around. And for me to encourage you to be the best that you can be and to reach that career dream might take you outside the organization at some point. But if, again, we're doing this really well, you're also probably going to come back. And again, that's what we want. We want employees who love where they work, love the people that they work with, and want to come back and recommend it to others.
I want to just close with this because David, you just prompted this. So there's a saying that I find to be perfect for this. Some people who are afraid say, what happens if we develop them and they leave? And the answer is, what happens if we don't and they stay?
Thank you so much for those closing remarks, Dr. Barrow. Thank you to all of our esteemed panelists, Dr. Jenny Barrow, Jasmine Hugh, Brad Johnson, and David Smith this morning. Thank you for so much wonderful advice. Thank you for joining the Women's Place. Have a wonderful rest of your morning. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists. I learned so much from you today.
Same here. Very nice meeting you all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Oh, hello, everybody. Wonderful. Thank you, Andrea. Hi there. Welcome, everybody, to our second panel today, Time is Money, Creating Streams of Income. And thank you very much for joining us. I'm Meta Brown. I'm an associate professor of economics here at Ohio State. I'm a research fellow of the Institute for Economic Equity and a faculty affiliate of the Institute for Population Research. I'm a labor economist and household finance economist. And I work on things like whether we know what we owe and debt portfolio maneuvers of more or less sophisticated consumers, the graying of American debt and related topics. I'm really excited to moderate today's second panel. So we've heard the saying that time is money, which encourages us to value both our time and our dollars. During this panel, we're going to talk about how to make the most of both time and money by leveraging your retirement, investing, and perhaps creating additional streams of income through a side hustle or a passion project. And after a shared conversation on these topics, we'll reserve time to entertain questions from the audience. So please feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A function near the center of the screen. And please make sure to submit any questions for the panelists and or moderator in the Q&A function instead of in the chat. We'd be very excited to hear from you with questions. And so next, let's introduce our panelists. I'd like to welcome our esteemed panelists and like to continue the practice of asking our panelists to tell you a little bit about themselves, which might connect you more immediately with our panelists. So first we have with us Dr. LaCorey Meadows.
Hello, good morning, everyone. It's indeed a pleasure to be here. My name is Dr. LaCorey Meadows, and I serve as the CEO and co-founder of InvestToGive, where I help change lives through helping people understand how to navigate the stock market using stocks and options. So it's such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, LaCorey. Thank you. And we're also happy to have with us today James Jensen Grace. James.
Good morning. Good morning. So I'm James Jensen Grace. I'm a serial entrepreneur in the social media marketing and branding space. I'm also a transgender man that is in business. I've got no traditional background. I was born and raised in the mountains on a ranch. So all of this has been self-taught, and I've continued to just kind of grow throughout the years. Let's see, I'm the founder of Branding for Pride, as well as I'm starting up Academy Rebrand, which will be focused on creating impactful branding and sustainable business models.
Thank you, James. All right, so I have a few questions for each of you, and maybe some for both. So the last 3 years of the pandemic have led many people to reconsider their jobs, and more than that, their reliance on their jobs for income. But of course, for those of us working with Ohio State, we're working with a great employer. We definitely prefer for all of us to stay here at the university. But you still may be thinking about how to earn more, not only through a raise or promotion, but also through investing and entrepreneurship. And many of us are from backgrounds or family cultures that maybe just don't talk about money. And then maybe we had jobs or salaries that didn't allow us to invest early on. So first of all, what are some steps to creating healthier relationships with money today? LaCorey.
Yes, thank you so much for that question. I think it's a very important one. So I have had the pleasure of working with countless students across not only the United States, but the globe. And one of the key things that I have noticed that's important for all of us to understand is to get radically honest with self, right? Radically honest with self. And having an understanding of, do you have a command over your money, or does your money have a command over you? Okay, do you have a command over your money, or does your money have a command over you? So I think one key thing, in addition to becoming radically honest with yourself, is really thinking about, what did you learn about money as a child, as a youth? What did mom, dad, grandmother, auntie, uncle, whoever had the fortune of raising you teach you about money? And how does that knowledge inform your relationship with money today? Is it serving you? Is it not serving you? Right? So spending some time sitting with that, I think, is really important. The second concept I think is really important as we think about how do we improve our relationship with money is identifying what your North Star is. So what is that goal that you set to accomplish, right? Is it 365 days from now? Do you want to be celebrating owning a new home? Do you want to be celebrating having a robust investment account? What is that goal that you want to accomplish? Once you've identified that goal, then the next step is understanding, okay, after I've been radically honest with myself, after I understand what goal I have set forth, how do I become the person who knows how to do the thing to have what I desire, right? And that's a journey. That's a journey. So thinking about, okay, so all of those lessons I learned, what's serving me and what's not, how do I strategically transition to a place that I can become the person that knows how to do the thing to have the things that I desire? So that would be my kind of 3 key tips to improving our relationship with money.
Those are extremely enlightening. Thank you. And sort of mid-career older folks like me, I find that extremely valuable. Thank you.
Awesome.
Let's see. So also, I mean, so the next question is, many people feel intimidated by the process of starting to invest. So how can you ease into the process? How do you begin?
Yeah. So yes, I think it's really interesting because I think that many of us are kind of given this 3-step life hack, right, to life. We're taught to go to school, right? That's number 1, first thing, go to school, check, got that done. Get a good job, second step, right? Check, got that, make good money. Okay, check, got that, right? So once we've accomplished those 3 things, it's like, okay, I've magically arrived, right? But I would argue that there's one key step that we're missing. And that is, how do we make our money make more of itself? Okay, how do we make our money make more of itself? So understanding that most of us are given this 3-step life hack, I think it's important for us to give ourselves grace in that process. As we ease into investing, knowing that the majority of us haven't had conversations about investing around our dinner tables, right? The majority of us haven't had a chance to take courses to teach us how to buy real estate or navigate the stock market or purchase collectibles that are going to be valuable for us for the long time, right? So a lot of us are starting with our first step. So acknowledging that and giving yourself grace in the process is one key important concept of easing our way into it. So the next thing I would say is, okay, so now that we've situated ourselves and we understand that, yes, I should give myself grace, then it's identifying, what do I want to invest in? Okay, so there's a lot of different options that are at our disposal. My expertise is the stock market, but I also am into real estate. I also am an angel investor. You can also invest in cryptocurrencies, you name it. There's a gazillion things that you can do. So really understanding, okay, what is it that I aspire to do? Understanding my level of risk tolerance, right? And then educating myself on the options that exist within that respective asset class is another next step, okay? So understanding that, I think, is really important. After we've educated ourselves, establishing a plan to secure the funds. So investing requires an investment, right? So having some funds accessible, even if we have to start small, that's okay. At least we've taken that first step. It will be really helpful. So establishing a plan to secure the funds will be the next thing. And then last but not least, execution, all right? Execution, making it happen, right? Using the knowledge that we've gained and making sure that we execute on it is really helpful as well. It's most important as well.
Thank you, LaCoria. That's a very practical and insightful description of the beginning. That makes me feel optimistic about next steps.
Awesome.
So this next one, I think, James, you have a great deal of expertise in this next question, this next area, I know. So for listeners who may be thinking about starting their own businesses, how do you do this while working full time? And what determines when you're ready to move from a hobby to a small business?
Well, first of all, that is a very loaded question. So it may take me a minute, but let me start by saying that for me, when I first got started, I was actually kind of learning everything on my own. I was working 2 full-time jobs, actually, so anywhere between 60 to 80 hours a week. And I happened to actually start with being a wedding DJ, funny enough. Eventually, I was able to figure out, I primarily did that on the weekends. And eventually I was able to figure out, how can I make social media work for me? How can I find the brides and make the brides kind of see me and be interested in hiring me to come out and do a show? So that's kind of how everything got started. Luckily, I worked a overnight job at one of them. So I was able to study and kind of get an idea and a grasp on entrepreneurship because, like I said, I grew up on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. So I didn't think I had many opportunities in front of me. And I feel like the top things that I really focused on was just making sure that I balanced my time between like my calendar. It started out really small with just a couple of things put in there. And now I've been able to track every minute of my day so that I can make sure I get the most out of each day. There's some great AI tools out there as well, so that'll help. And if you feel like you can't do anything on a certain day, this quote that always rings in my head is, if you feel like you're at 30% instead of 100% of your normal, give 100% of that 30. You're still giving 100%. Even if it's not very much, you're still giving 100%. And it's okay to clear your calendar, breathe, and move forward with your journey. Let's see, I took some notes here because I wanted to make sure I went over a few things. I also feel like putting in the work is top priority. A lot of people I feel like there's 2 types of entrepreneurs. There's the type that may have the money and the funding and the investment to back everything, so they can hire up and down. They can get the execs thrown in there. But what really matters to me is making sure that you jump on the ball and get sales. So a lot of people will want to outsource all of these tasks versus grabbing onto them and saying, hey, this is my business, my company. I've got to develop the way that, this is going to be done. How will sales be done? How will we connect? How will we implement whatever strategy we're going to be doing for this client? Next thing would definitely be thinking about like automating and outsourcing. What can you do? That was one of the challenging parts for me. I didn't want to give any tasks away to anybody. So I would consume myself in all of these tasks and be overwhelmed and try to spend half my day on connecting with people so I can hopefully get some leads, try to spend the other half of my day doing the work for clients. So all of that gets too overwhelming, and you have to really sit down and evaluate and go, hey, I really don't have time for all of these additional tasks. At least I can hire, I don't know, a virtual assistant to help me with this one piece. Maybe I can hire a content editor to make that easier for me. I would say hold on to your sales until, maybe a year or 2 where you can really actually give it to somebody else. But with the other things that can be kind of mundane tasks, hand those off to somebody. Get a project manager, somebody that can help you out. The last thing that I really think of is cutting the learning curve. Instead of going out and just doing it all yourself, get yourself a mentor. Mentors will cut that learning curve so much. And if you don't have the money for a mentor, just be willing to be vulnerable and just communicate and say, I may not have the financial investment, but I'm willing to put in the work. Some of the best mentors I had would actually take a chance on me and like sponsor me. And that always kind of made me want to prove myself even more. Yeah, so it's kind of been a fun journey throughout the years, but I would definitely say that those were definitely the top keys to like how I kind of moved forward in thinking about time management and starting, because you're running around 40 hours a week, doing your job. On top of that, you've got your commute, you've got sleep, you've got all these things. We've got 168 hours in a week, and we spend a lot of time on the normal everyday life, and just trying to figure out how can I organize, simplify it. Oprah's got the same amount of time as we do, You know, how was she able to do it? She figured it out and prioritized. So, yeah.
Thank you, James. I'm internally collecting these wise tools for making the most of the time that we do have. I know that as a sort of mid-career working mom, I will soon be thinking of 100% of 30%. Thank you for that one. And so delving more deeply into this topic area, we know that branding is important to gaining visibility for your talents. How do you begin to build your presence and your brand? And how do you set your rates, determining how much your time is worth as we talk about time?
Yeah. So top keys that I would definitely say for getting your branding out there. First of all, you really have to start with social media. That is going to be the freest option for you out there, the cheapest and honestly the easiest option. You want to make sure that you focus on like some key points like sharing what you do, being proud of what you do, being personable but not personal. That can be something that a lot of people don't think about. Personable would be, for me, I'm fun, creative. I'm like a bubble of energy. So being personable and like connecting with people that way, but not being personal where I'm giving too much of myself and I'm kind of feeding into that. Here's the story in my life kind of day, or a day in my life kind of thing. So starting kind of there, then leaning into, so building your personal brand, I know there was some mention of that. So you could always build your personal brand by starting with social media, but you can always, I would say that is definitely top thing. Build it with your personal brand, because any business that you start, you can talk about it with your followers and people will be potentially interested, right? So starting there and starting, your business social media. From there, going into rates. My rates for the longest time were very, very low because all the people around me were all still in the scarce money mindset. So they felt like charging somebody $500 for something was way too much. And it took time to really find a network and mentors that actually made me realize that I've actually worked really hard to obtain a lot of knowledge that I can help other people with. So since I have this value and I am valuable, I can offer my services. And what really sells isn't what I'm selling. What really sells is the cost of not going with me and the results, the guaranteed results that I'm going to give you if you work with me is what really matters, not just the price point. Some people get really hung up and say, for instance, like a logo. Some people may think, $100 for a logo, it can get done. But what really matters is, the value of it. If there's somebody charging for a logo design that's going to be $10,000, I know that seems astronomical, but they have the experience, the expertise in creating that, and they've got a process, and that takes time to be able to build up to that. And I think everybody is capable of building up to that. It's just really seeing what value am I providing, because it's not just a logo. You're providing a brand, like a brand look to everybody. You're going to captivate that in a different way because you may understand it in a complex manner, which, that $100 logo creation, they may kind of just slap some things together because they don't have the skill set to go and back it. So that's what I'd start with.
Thank you very much, James. It's a powerful direction for structuring your entrepreneurial effort on so many different fronts, and many that wouldn't have come to me immediately, but they're clearly very important. Thank you. Okay, and so here's one you've heard from my previous comment I might be particularly invested in, but as we age, what are some ways, to both of you, that we may need to shift our financial plan?
I'm going to let you take it first because you're more into investing than I am, and my approach on investing might be different. So let's hear it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it all depends on your level of risk tolerance that you have. So while I am not a financial advisor, and this isn't meant to be financial advice, but one of the things that is incredibly important as we become more seasoned in our careers and in our lives, it's helpful to think about more conservative approaches towards investing, especially given that our time horizon is going to be shorter than time horizon for liquidating our securities is going to be shorter than when we initially started on this journey. So the way that that might look is if we look at, for example, there's 4 asset classes, right? Stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and what is considered alternative investment. So if we look at that pie, typically when we are of younger age, investing in the stock market is the more kind of lucrative, right? Potentially lucrative asset class to consider. But as we age, and right now is a perfect example of that because we've experienced a significant pullback in the market and the prices of our stocks, then we might want to become a little bit more conservative, right? And to reallocate our portfolio in a way that is not as aggressive as it has been in the past. So to tie a bow around that, essentially what I'm suggesting is that as we get a little bit older, to think about, okay, what level of risk am I willing to assume? Okay. And does my current investment strategy support that? If the answer is no, okay, if the answer is like, I don't know, right? I'm not sure, seek professional help, right? But if the answer is absolutely no, then perhaps there should be some reallocation in the process. So hopefully that helps.
I think that's really great. I'm more of the, I'm comfortable taking risks. Let's
Okay.
just dive in. Let's just do it,
Put it in.
you know? And I have found for me personally, investing has definitely been an option, but I've kind of held off because I want to build businesses first, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Build up those two and then start to lean into how can I invest and spread it out to make that money work for me. So I think that you're key. I like that.
Awesome, awesome. But I also like your approach because I think that your businesses can fund your investments, right?
Exactly.
And then also as you're navigating your way through as an entrepreneur, there are going to be so many different things that come before you, right? That you can have a lot of options at your disposal as well. You know, like that. Good stuff.
Interesting to think about the traditional 4 asset classes, and then importantly, the fact that many of us are investing in our own small business, in our own entrepreneurial work as sort of a 5th category of investment in our futures, and maybe increasingly these sort of small projects or medium-sized projects that we lead as a part of our plan for the future. That's an interesting insight, and this is a terrific collection of perspectives on the options that are available to us from both sides. Thank you, guys. I'd say that I should also say, like LaCour, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm a professor. So my habit is I don't advise people on what they ought to do. I don't tend to think about what people ought to do financially, but I describe what people do financially. And I know in recent cohorts, sort of older Americans approaching retirement or in retirement, we have a lot more wealth as a group than previous cohorts had at this stage, but we also have a lot more debt. I'm interested in the fact that we're balancing the 2 sides more. We're living a more financialized life, so we invest, but we also carry debt, and it seems like a normative and a common phenomenon. And as we talk about risk in our investments, it also strikes me as we're behaving in a more risky manner as we carry debt further toward retirement. Although it's encouraging that more of us are brought into the investing process. I think that seems like the exciting news.
Absolutely.
The best part is how social media has gotten all of us kind of aware of this.
Yes.
You know?
And also I agree with the social media component, but I also believe that, especially as it relates to the stock market in general, a lot of brokerage firms have made it easier than ever for new retail investors to get engaged within the stock market as well. One thing that since I've been actively engaged in the market that has been a game changer, I think, for a lot, is the removal of commissions as it relates to purchasing shares of stock. Yes, right. So that's definitely a huge asset for anyone that wants to get into this space, that you don't have to pay for your entry as well as your exits for shares. But with options you do, but not for shares. So that's good.
It's very practical and helpful news, absolutely. And your attention to the risks as we all carefully balance our risks. That's a helpful perspective as well. Hey, let's see. So in addition, just broadly, what other resources or steps would you recommend for people to enhance their financial growth or growth as entrepreneurs? And this is a broad question to both of you as well.
So I love the comment that James mentioned earlier, and that is securing. He mentioned a mentor, and the way I think of it is a coach, right? Someone who has been there, done that, have the t-shirt, the keychain, and the bumper sticker, right? They are going to be the quickest pathway to success. As I was growing my business, and also as I was learning how to invest and trade on the stock market in particular, as well as in real estate, as well as to become an angel investor, right? I had people in my inner circle that were advising and helping me take each step along the way. And I think that if I would have done it alone, I would not be anywhere close to where I am today. Because there's, and also I would have spent a lot more money. I lost a lot more money, right, than what I would have, without having them in my circle. So I think I just want to elevate that point once again, that is so incredibly important. So thank you for sharing that, James.
Yeah, it is. And something that I think of is earlier somebody mentioned, I think it was maybe David that maybe mentioned something of, what was it? Them being your biggest fan or your mentor being your, I can't quite remember what the wording was, but having my mentors believe in me made a huge difference because everybody around you may not see the same vision. I've recently actually realized for me that I put myself in a fear box with the people around me. Jenny kind of touched on that with a client where she had said something to like share a win with everybody around her, and others had thought that it was bragging. So I've put myself in that fear box of, fearful that I may sound like I'm bragging with people. I may sound like I think I'm better than other people in this box. So finding this interesting balance of bringing yourself to the table. And I think mentors and masterminds have helped me be able to realize like not only my value and potential, but also the potential for more in life, financially, maybe with freedom, financial freedom, things of that nature. But being able to just be supported and, be able to celebrate your little wins. Celebrating the little wins is huge. I'm a type that I work in silence and I let the results speak for themselves. So talking about money for me is a little challenging because I like to focus and keep quiet and work hard. And like I said, let those results speak for themselves. As an entrepreneur, I feel like growing as an entrepreneur, masterminds and network really made a big difference, but also taking time to study and learn and dig within, deconstructing kind of what I was told growing up, thinking about, I'll be honest, I've had to also dig into kind of the emotional hold that I may have just because of the way that I was, my upbringing. So finding a way to just sit with yourself, process who you are, and not necessarily pick who you are and find who you are, but think about who you're becoming and aim to do the things that that person you're becoming would do, and implementing those in your day-to-day life. and also failing fast and failing forward. I have failed so many times. And what I usually do when I fail is I step back, I get out a legal pad, and I go to town on it. And I will I'll think through every single process that I am challenged with and that I need to overcome. So I try to analyze and write maybe I'm trying to think of a good example here, but sitting down and just kind of writing down and saying, what did I do today that was good? How did I cross that threshold and challenge myself? But also, what did I not do so well so that I could do it better tomorrow? Not beating myself down for it, but actually analyzing like, hey, you're talking too much in a sales call. It's time to really reanalyze what I'm doing and hold myself accountable so that I can put my best foot forward and be my own hero in the end. So I would say those definitely are the top ones.
Thank you both. Thank you both. Those are very insightful next steps, and not the universal obvious what we all know already. Next steps in moving forward in both financial health and entrepreneurial work. I think these are fascinating and unique, and I appreciate. I'm learning a great deal from the session, selfishly as we go. Thank you.
May I add one more? Because I think one thing that I'm thinking of was critical in my entrepreneurship journey. As I was listening to James talk about sitting with self, that was something that I had to do. And I had to go through this process of unbecoming. Okay, so my mentor talks about this notion of be, do, have, right? Become the person who can do the things to have what we desire. But I had to unbecome the person who no longer served that next level entrepreneur. I had to unbecome the person who was so busy, I love to travel. So anybody who knows me knows I'm going to hop on a plane in a minute, right? But who's going to spend all their money, across the world somewhere, but invest that money instead into my business, right? I had to unbecome the person who was careless or carefree about some personal matters as it related to finances, right? So that journey of unbecoming was a critical step towards getting to the space where I am today. So I just wanted to share that as well.
I'd like unbecoming is a wonderful description of a process. I like that very much. And all of this information on sort of where to find mentorship, what mentors have brought to you, and how to learn in these experiences, it seems incredibly valuable. So I appreciate all the thoughts about resources and the process of learning, which is sort of the deeper part of this experience, I think. And so I could also add that I could highlight from the chat that Andrea, let's see, yes, Andrea, I'm going through too many links here, has shared with us, oops, so sorry. Dear goodness, I've lost it. In any case, our employee support available regarding financial learning is there in the chat. So I'd like to highlight that in addition to the steps that we've talked to in this most recent discussion, the sorts of resources available to us, there are also some resources available via OSU. And so the employee support, the employee assistance program resources for financial learning as we go, in addition to identifying mentors, can be very valuable. Okay, so let's see here. And related to the resources aspect of it, having talked about the steps related to the resources dimension, for more on money matters, as a reminder, the Women's Place hosts negotiations trainings. I personally am going to look into that. And you can also make an appointment to talk with the Women's Place director about other moves as you're considering in your career. And at this point, I think it might be a great time to entertain some questions from the audience. Let's see here. Okay, so from Daryl, what advice would you give to anyone to make the most out of their 401k or retirement plan opportunities through a company? Also, what would you advise for saving in retirement for someone who is owning their own business?
Okay, so I am not a financial advisor, so I don't want to provide that level of advice using this particular forum. But I would say if you can, if you have the opportunity to meet with your professional that's associated with your retirement plan, and they will be able to help you with that process. But I also encourage you to educate yourself as well. Educate yourself on the fees. And I'm going to pause there, okay? Because I want to bring that point home. Educate yourself on the fees that are associated with your respective retirement plans as well. And bring those questions to your financial advisor, because at the end of the day, those fees, while it may seem small, do make a big difference in the long run, okay? So that would be my response. Okay.
I would certainly agree. And again, reiterating, I'm certainly not an advisor or a source of direction on financial, what one should do financially. I've just did a lot of work describing what folks do, but certainly fees are a great thing to be aware of in your programs. I know that the university offers, if for those here who are university employees, offers a lot of training and financial resources to learn more about the retirement programs that they offer and what's available to you within those. And also, again, not a financial advisor, but it's helpful to be aware of the maneuvers that are available within your plan. So a lot of maneuvers within employer offered plans do not then lead to tax consequences. The investments remain within the plan, and sometimes that's a piece of information that descriptively many of us are lacking. So it's not that every manipulation of your portfolio leads to a tax consequence, and there's some fear around that. So learning a lot about your plan will be helpful, and learning about that likely aspect of your plan might be helpful too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and recognizing that time is a factor with that as well as it relates to tax implications as well. So that's important.
Absolutely. Let's see here. To Dr. Meadows, do you recommend any financial investment apps such as Ellevest for someone interested in investing in stocks?
Absolutely. So Ellevest is a phenomenal one. I know that Andrea likes Ellevest a lot. She's worked with me with some things as it relates to stock trading in the past. So Ellevest is great. Another company that I do not have an affiliation with, but I often recommend to my students is TD Ameritrade. Now, the reason why I recommend TD Ameritrade is because they have phenomenal educational resources, phenomenal. They have respective quizzes, tests, books, videos, you name it, that can help you to take your first or your next steps as it relates to engaging with the stock market in particular. So TD Ameritrade is really, really good. Another thing that I like about them is that if you prefer to have in-person education, they offer workshops at different places across the country. I used to visit them all, go to their sessions all the time, and oftentimes it would be a lot, but it was a great way to be in community with other people that speak the same language that you can learn from. All right, so that would be one that I would recommend as well. Investopedia. So just for basic financial information, I'm just going to give some general resources here. Investopedia is a great resource as well. So one of the things I always encourage people who are interested in learning more about the economy, learning more about the stock market, or what companies are doing or so forth, is spending time listening to CNBC. And oftentimes you on that station, you'll hear words, you're like, well, what does that mean? What is a basis point, right? What are we talking about with the banks, Silicon Valley? What is happening here, right? So there any term that you don't understand, Investopedia is also a great resource. It's not an app that you were asking about, but that's another great resource just to get some foundational information to educate yourself on. All right, and there's tons of others, but those are a few to come to mind right now.
Thank you, LaCora. I think that was, I see the sort of the links to the resources coming through in the chat. Thank you very much, you guys, for that. And that was a very resourceful response, and I appreciate that a great deal. Okay, so let me give a moment in case there are any additional. Oh, good, here we go. So what gives you, from an anonymous attendee, what gives you the most joy about the work you're doing in the financial industry now?
Seeing students make money. I love it. I had a student text me the other day, Michael, and he was like, guess what? I just made $500 in 5 minutes. I was like, yes, can I hold 50? So I was so proud of him for doing that. I've had another student who has been working with me for 3 months, and she's already profited $11,000. That was life-changing for her, right? So seeing students put the education that I've been teaching them to practice and actually winning at this has been just, it makes me just light up and want to do a dance. So I love that. Seeing students make money, but then also I would say beyond the financial aspect, it's the transition in mindset, right? Because for many of us, money, at least I'll speak for myself, money was something to be used to buy things, right? Given away. I get it, I put it out, right? For me, I give it and I give it to an airline, right? I give it to a hotel or somewhere, right? So that's what I grew up learning and understanding. But to see the mindset shift from consumership to that of ownership, and recognizing the value that money can play in replicating itself is amazing, amazing. Also, watching students see that it's a lot easier to make a lot of money in a short period of time than it is to make a little money in a long period of time. Okay, so a lot easier to make a lot of money in a short period of time than it is to make a little money in a long period of time. So once that recognition is there, it changes everything. Changes everything. So those are some of the things that come top of mind for me as it relates to what excites me about being in this space. Yeah.
Thank you, LaCora. Oh, James, how about you?
Most exciting is definitely students or people that I've mentored, I guess. Being able to see them gain results. That is definitely rewarding. You know, seeing somebody be able to just get a grasp on the way that their brand should feel, how it should, the voice of it and how it should be portrayed out there. Hearing people's small little wins where they connect with their brand more and make a little bit more money to further that impact, I would say that is definitely the most rewarding thing, truly. I definitely agree with that. It's not necessarily about like what we're making or anything. It's definitely like the impact that we hold and that we provide. And something I wanted to make a key point on this because I think about it all the time. If you feel like you can't see through, see the next step. You may not be able to hit the markets and make a bunch of money right away. You may never make money hitting the markets, right? You may have to pick different investments. You may have to just keep failing. But if you can stop and say, you know, I may not be able to see through to the end of this, but I can see my next step to take. I feel like that's probably one of the most rewarding things, is being in love with the process and not necessarily just the results at the end. So
definitely process. Yeah, I agree.
it looks like somebody sent me a question directly. So give me just 1 second. If I choose to speak. So being a business owner who is underrepresented in the market. Oh, so yeah, so actually an interesting topic. So I work LGBTQ plus primarily with branding for Pride. And after Pride Month, we actually lost 70% of our revenue, and it hit hard. And it didn't just hit hard for business, it hit hard for me as an individual, especially because I'm so connected with my community and I want to do so much to feed into my community and help pull them out of kind of that poverty mindset or that mindset of, you know, money scarcity kind of thing. So having to really identify like where I'm at emotionally, but also where my audience and my market is. Throughout this last year dealing with that, I really realized that maybe my market may not necessarily be LGBTQ plus. Maybe the people that I work with are more impact driven business models, you know? So finding little tweaks to change it up. Being a trans man in business, we are so underrepresented. There are a couple billionaires that are actually out there that are trans, but most of them have either inherited money or I can't think of her name, but the founder of Sirius Radio, she's also trans. I think is it Marty? I think I can't remember her name exactly. But you know, I'm this person that's kind of faced with some challenges in my own ways. And I don't think it's always just being a transgender man. I think a lot of it is actually the mindset of going from, I was born female. So going from experiencing life as a female and dealing with privilege in a different way to now experiencing male privilege in a different way. Women have to work so much harder to prove that they're good enough, and it's just wrong. It needs to change. I like the point of walking into the room and, you know, pretending like you own it, because you will own it if you walk into that room and try. Yeah, it's a really tough topic to dive into. But being aware of kind of just who you're representing and how you're representing yourself, but take pride in the fact that you may be a woman-owned business, or you may be, you know, I'm trans-owned, you know, as a new term. Instead of women-owned or Black-owned, I'm a trans-owned business. And I can connect with other trans-owned business people, and hopefully we can all ride the wave together and go up together.
I certainly hope so. I feel that we're grateful for, as you described, your somewhat rare perspective in the small business space. And so that's a lucky and valuable thing about our conversation today. Thank you for bringing that to us.
You just got to go with it. Take the punches, take the kicks, get back up. You know, what do we tell a kid when they're learning how to walk? You know, speak to yourself like you're that 5-year-old kid, and or you know, whatever. I don't know. I don't have kids. How old do kids start walking? 1 or 2? Speak to yourself like it's that kid taking its first steps. You're going to cheer it on. You're going to cheer yourself on. You're going to cheer the whole situation on, and you're going to be in full support of it and enjoying the process. And when that kid falls down, that kid's got to get back up, and you can watch that kid grow.
Thank you. I appreciate the self-teaching perspective on all of this, and then digging back into the conversation a little bit. Like I'm enjoying and identifying very closely with the sort of the joy that you take in your students' successes. And so as we've talked a long way through the conversation today about finding mentors and what can be gained, what you've learned from your own mentors, and the necessity of connecting with a mentor, what we can gain from them. You know, we tend to think, why would anybody want to mentor me? But your descriptions of your own joy in the successes of your mentees and of your students really gives us a window into why we might expect that we could connect with somebody in the way of finding them as a mentor, because it also creates value for them. I think that's very, very important.
Not necessarily why they want to mentor me, but why not, right? Why not?
Absolutely.
I'm open to learning, so why not?
That is very valuable. I'm
Take
ready
that
to
approach
learn. Why
on.
not?
Love it. I've really taken away so much value here, and thank you everybody for showing up to this, and thank you to all the panelists. Seriously, this has been eye-opening for even me.
I share the same sentiment. It was great.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, LaCorey. Thank you, James. I couldn't possibly agree more. I really appreciate it. So thank you all so much for tuning in. I think we're going to have a brief break at this point. And I wanted to remind you to underscore that after the short break at noon, we're going to have our keynote session. So I hope to see you back here shortly. And thank you so much to both of our panelists.
Awesome. The pleasure is all mine. Thank you.